Oh yes, hello. Yes. Hello, and welcome everyone to our very special EU public meeting, organised by the EU Postgraduates and Staff. Especially a warm welcome to everyone here who's been brought along by a friend or just happened to wander in and be visiting us today. If you aren't familiar with the EU, where the Evangelical Union is a student club of hundreds of students who are Bible-believing followers of Jesus. We proclaim that Jesus is Lord because we believe that he is amazingly good news for our world. Every week, we run small group Bible studies where we read and discuss the Bible, and we also hold public meetings where the Bible is read and taught, and anyone is welcome to come and take part in these activities. For EU postgrads and staff in particular, we also run discipline networks, which are less frequent in small groups, but allow people from similar academic specialties and backgrounds to gather. Anyone is welcome to join our Bible studies and public meetings at any time. And we would love the non-believers, especially, to come and find out more by coming and joining us at any of these events. In these couple of weeks, weeks 4 and 5 of the semester, we're holding a very particular series of events under the banner of unexpected answers, especially inviting people who don't know much of what's going on, outsiders, to come and see how Jesus gives different and better answers to questions. Better answers to questions than we might have thought. I'll give everyone a real quick moment to tell us that you're here. Feel free to scan the QR code on the screen. Just take a moment to let us know that you're here and if you're interested in any of them. Today, the talk that our speaker, Rowan, will be sharing is Jesus and Max. You've got to be kidding. I'm personally very excited and curious about what exactly Rowan is going to be sharing with us. But before we get started, and maybe while you're still finishing off some of those forms and those QR code forms, I want you to just turn to the person next to you and share the last time you either had to use maths or studied maths at some capacity in your life. Thanks everyone. Hopefully we can continue those very interesting discussions. I hope everyone wants to introduce themselves. Yeah, we'll come back together now. Thank you, everyone. Oh, so many stories. As a physics student myself, I know all about having really deep conversations about mathematics. I know we can hardly contain ourselves. No, we'll take a little bit of time. Yeah, but we can continue those discussions maybe later. Hopefully you got to introduce yourself to people around you if you didn't know each other. At this point, let me introduce our speaker for today, Rowan. So Rowan is the current staff team leader at the EU, and at one point actually did a PhD in mathematics right here at USage. Please give him a warm up.
Thanks so much for the invitation to come and talk with you today. It may be difficult to think of a more crazy title for a talk on a university campus than Jesus and mathematics, but we'll see how we go. Over Plato's academy in ancient Athens was inscribed the following: "Let no man ignorant of geometry enter." You can imagine the scene when you turned up for a bit of late night club action down at Plato's on a Saturday night in ancient Greece. You fronted up to be greeted by the beefy Athenian bouncer on the door, but instead of checking the dress code, he asked you just to write out a quick proof of Pythagoras' theorem to see if you'll fit the scene that's really cooking inside. Fortunately, the same entry standards and the same sexism don't apply to you today. I won't be bamboozling you with complex mathematics. There's no set maths prerequisite for what we're looking at today, though I do trust that you'll find it interesting. Nor for that matter do I intend to push Jesus down your throat as though as a Christian, that's my duty, though as a Christian, I believe Jesus is essential to a thorough grasp of reality. And I'll be talking a little bit about that today. So, Jesus and maths. Pretty strange topic. I've lost count of the number of people who looked at me and said, what could you possibly say on this topic? Jesus had 12 disciples. Jesus took 5 loaves, multiplied them by 2 fish, and got 5,000 lunches with 12 baskets remaining. I mean, is that, at first glance, Jesus and mathematics appear completely disjointed. There's no non-trivial, substantial intersection between the two. Maybe the best we can do today is a few lame jokes and then give up and go home. That's moving way too quickly. That's because in some minds, Jesus and mathematics are key components of what are often touted as competing worldviews. According to this understanding, Jesus and maths, or more precisely the worldviews that they represent, are fundamentally at odds with one another. There is a complete incompatibility, indeed an all-out war, between the two competing worldviews, or so it goes, between Jesus and mathematics, or more precisely, between a scientific view of the world on one hand and a Christian worldview on the other. Now, this is worth taking a moment to understand. On the one hand, scientism says that the only certainties are scientifically verifiable ones. Now, that causes an immediate problem for the Christian faith, because crucial to Christian claims about the identity of Jesus is the claim that he rose from the dead, not in a resuscitation, but as a resurrection to a transformed physical body after being dead for 40 hours. Scientism says dead bodies don't rise. They can't. After 40 hours of death, the body has significantly started to decay. So Richard Dawkins, the eminent evolutionary biologist and author of The God Delusion, here's one example. Writing in an online forum, he was asked what he thought happened to Jesus after he died. His answer was, presumably what happened to Jesus was what happens to all of us when we die. We decompose. He continues, accounts of Jesus' resurrection and ascension are about as well documented as Jack and the Beanstalk. We'll come back to the question of the reliability of the resurrection accounts later, but you can see the logic. From a scientific point of view, the central claim of Christianity that Jesus was resurrected from the dead can't have happened. Dead people don't rise, they decompose. Whatever evidence there is, and there certainly is, I would say, a lot of historical evidence of Jesus' resurrection, whatever evidence you might point to, scientism says, some other explanation must exist. And to further entrench the view that you can't take both mathematics and Jesus seriously, people point to the like of Bertrand Russell, seriously significant mathematician and logician, who in 1927 famously gave a lecture, which you can still read today, Why I Am Not a Christian. If a serious mathematician like Russell has issues with Christianity, then surely there's some incompatibility. Furthermore, Christian theology appears to not care less about logic. Consider the Christian doctrine that says God is Trinity, 3 persons in one God, each person fully God, not just a bit of God, not 3 gods, nor 3 different modes of God, but one God, which frankly just sounds like 1 + 1 + 1 = 1, or more precisely, A + B + C equals D, but A doesn't equal B, sorry, A doesn't equal D, B doesn't equal D, C doesn't equal D, yeah, A is not B, is not C. That's wrong on so many levels, that set of equations. Do we just have to abandon all of our logical standards when we come to Christianity and to the person of Jesus? Don't we think there's something real about logic? How can we just leave our logic at the door when it comes to Jesus? But this war, as it is not just waged from one side. There is a segment of the Christian church who take a very literal interpretation of the opening chapters of the book of Genesis, the Christian Bible. On the basis of their literal reading of those chapters, they then deny some widely accepted scientific conclusions regarding either the age of the earth or the age of the universe. And so they breach. So the breach between sort of faith and in Jesus' belief and science, it just gets wider and wider. There are even what I would consider to be some more unusual positions. Some time ago, I heard about a book on Christian mathematics, arguing that we ought to use the two sets of numbers given by God when he told Noah to build the ark and when he told Moses to build the Israelite tabernacle. All mathematics, apparently, if it's to be Christian mathematics, will start from these divinely given number systems. Frankly, I find all of this very odd, quite disturbing, and a bit sad. I'm going to suggest to you that Jesus and mathematics do fit together, but not in a trivial, just stick in your own lane way, and nor in some way that sees one trample over the legitimate concerns and inquiring conclusions of the other. John Polkinghorne was an eminent quantum physicist who went on to become a prominent Christian thinker in the era of science and theology. He put it like this. He said, science and theology are partners in the great human quest to understand reality. Now, science and theology, or we could say Jesus and maths, are partners together. The question then is, how do they interact? How do they partner together? Well, John Polkinghorne suggests, and I think it's a helpful starting point, what he calls a consonance model. Maths and Christianity retain their own autonomy in their respective domains, but in the region of overlap, their statements must be consonant in an appropriate agreement or reconciliation. But more than that, I'm going to suggest that Jesus makes claims that embrace and reach over mathematics without dissolving it, and that correspondingly mathematics displays tendencies that point to this reality and this relationship, albeit in general ways. So to justify all this, we really need to deepen our grasp of both maths and Jesus. So let's think first about maths. Mathematics is a world of absolute certainty. It's about proof. Unlike the experimental sciences, mathematics is not about what we think is true by observation, but about what we know is true by proof. We start with fundamental axioms and work outwards using the laws of logic. An interesting example is the four-colour theorem. In 1852, a guy by the name of Francis Guthrie was trying to colour the different counties on a map of England. He noticed that only 4 different colours were needed to make sure that no counties next to each other had the same colour. You only needed 4 different coloured pencils. Francis asked his brother about it, who at the time was studying under Augustus de Morgan, famous scientist, mathematician, after whom De Morgan's laws are named, if you know those laws. According to De Morgan, he then said, a student of mine asked me today to give him a reason for a fact which I did not know was a fact and do not yet. The essence of mathematics is in that last phrase. I don't know it's a fact until it has been proven to be true. Proven to be true in every possible case. Don't give me 100 examples where it's true. Give me a proof that it's always true. Absolute certainty is the standard. Now, the reason this is such an interesting example, I think, is that there is debate amongst mathematicians about whether this problem has ever really been solved or not. In 1976, so that's 120 years later, Kenneth Apple, Wolfgang Hartmann at the University of Illinois, proved the four-colour theorem. They proved it by contradiction. That is, they assumed that there existed a map that needed 5 colours, and then basically showed that such a map can't exist. But they showed it couldn't exist by using a computer to check 1,936 different cases. And having used the computer to test all possibilities, they then pronounced they'd shown you'd only ever needed 4 colours. The tricky thing was, because of the way the computer program was written, and because of the huge amount of time it would take, no one could verify the result by hand. So it wasn't really true. What if the computer made a mistake? Moreover, and this is the real sticking point, it's a brute force method. Even if the computer hasn't made a mistake, it's like looking at a dense forest and saying, is there a way I can walk from where I am now all the way over to that peak over there? And then someone comes in with a bulldozer and just pushes over all the trees and says, yeah, look, you can. That's how to do it. You just do it like that. Well, thanks, but that wasn't really the point of my question. I wanted to know about all the little paths and understand how they weave together to make a track. I wanted to grasp the deeper structure of this reality, not just have an answer to my question. That's what maths is really about. The computer proof, if it's right, tells me that I never need more than 4 colours, but it doesn't tell me why. Why do I only need 4 colours? It doesn't give me a greater understanding of the relationships between colorings and topology. That deeper insight into the structure of reality is what mathematicians are really striving for. Not about just finding an answer to a question, as though the real issue was, as a professional map colorer, will I ever need to buy a fit coloured pencil? The real task is to uncover an insight into how things really are. I'll give you another example of the way mathematics works. A number of years ago, a geologist here at Sydney Uni had a problem. They were studying how seismic waves travel through the Earth's crust. So they had 2 deep shafts. At the bottom of one was some sort of seismic thumper sending out these seismic waves, and at the bottom of the other shaft was a recorder, a seismograph, registering those shock waves. But the geologist had a problem. In order to interpret the results, he needed to understand how the waves may be bouncing around between the different geological layers in the Earth's crust. He knew the layers that were there, but how many different ways might the waves be bouncing around? Well, that sounded to him like a maths question, so he went off and talked to a mate of his in the applied maths department here at uni. The applied mathematician listened to the problem and then said, well, that's a combinatorial question, a question about counting things that are hard to count. You need to go and talk to a combinatorist. And he referred the geologist onto the combinatorist in the pure maths department here at uni, who happened to be my PhD supervisor at the time, which is why I know the story. Carl, my supervisor, listened to the problem, and then he went searching in the pure maths literature. He came across the work of a pure mathematician, Narayana, who back in the 1950s had worked on theoretical questions, not prompted by any real-world situation, that could now be applied to this geologist's real-world question. Now, that's a nice story of academic cooperation, but let me ask you a question. Do you think that was just a weird coincidence? There was just some freakish chance that some mathematician decades before had developed some formulas that then turned out to have a real-world application? Do you think it's just a coincidence that mathematics astoundingly reflects and models reality, providing answers to questions we haven't even asked yet? Because it raises the question, what really is going on in mathematics? See, some mathematicians say maths is a human invention. Leopold Kronecker was a 19th century German mathematician and logician, and he famously said, God made all the integers, the rest is the work of man. Or Alfred North Whitehead was a very well-known British mathematician. He was also a philosopher and a logician. And writing in the earliest 20th century, he said, the science of pure mathematics in its modern developments may claim to be the most original creation of the human spirit. Now, certainly we do create all sorts of things in mathematics. We create notation, representation, methods of proof. But our experience of mathematics and how it interacts with the real world around us suggests that maths, or at least the complex realities that maths describes, is much more than just a human creation. In particular, mathematics has proved amazingly adept at describing reality around us. So much so that at times it has both explained what was previously unexplained, and at times it has predicted aspects of reality that only subsequently are confirmed experimentally. As an example, John Polkinghorne relates the story of a physicist, Paul Dirac, who formulated a famous equation, which is now named after him, which succeeded in combining quantum theory with special relativity in a consistent fashion. Polkinghorne tells the story. He says, an immediate but unanticipated bonus from the discovery of this equation was that it was found to imply that the magnetic interactions of electrons were twice what one would naively have expected them to be. This was already known to be the case from experiment, but no one previously had been able to understand why it was so. A few years later, more thinking about the same equation led Dirac to the fundamental discovery of the existence of antimatter. Such continuing and uncovenanted fruitfulness is very persuasive that one is on to something of real significance. He's not alone in that conclusion. In an essay in 1959, distinguished theoretical physicist Eugene Dignan wrote about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences. Why does mathematics work so well at describing and predicting the shape of reality? Many others asked the same question. Carl Pearson was one of the founders of modern statistics. He coined the term standard deviation and invented the chi-square test. He said the mathematician carried along on his flood of symbols, dealing apparently with purely formal truths, may still reach results of endless importance for our description of the physical universe. And none less than Albert Einstein, who was a pretty smart fellow, he realized that the astounding effective modeling that mathematics provides of the real world just should make you wonder. How can it be that mathematics, being after all the product of human thought, independent of experience, is so admirably adapted to the objects of reality? What all this implies is that maths is more than just a descriptive tool, and it's certainly more than just an intellectual game. Maths identifies and describes something real at the structural level of reality. Now, the language of maths may change. I may use Arabian numerals or Roman numerals, but the Arabian is much more efficient and powerful language to describe reality. I may use the calculus of Newton or the method of Leibniz, but the Leibniz notation is the one which seems to be, we seem to be the most comfortable. I may describe the behavior of electrical circuits with complex number equations or by mathematical category theory. The mathematical system may change, but when we hit on an effective mathematical description that captures the structural relations operating in reality, we often get new insights from the mathematics that are then subsequently found in reality. And there's aspects of reality for which we lacked any real understanding are suddenly illuminated. That is, in mathematics, we've hit on something that is deeply true in reality. This is worth reflecting on for a moment, because it tells us, I think, something significant about the world in which we live. What is apparent is that reality is profoundly ordered. I don't mean simplistically ordered, that's obviously not the case, but there is a profound order within the complexity. Chaos theory would be one example. The fractal recursive nature of the world around us is not actually chaotic, but profoundly ordered, albeit complexly so. The mathematics works that it describes, models, and predicts reality tells us that reality is ordered. We can say more than that. It's not just ordered, it's ordered in a beautiful way, an elegant way. John Polkinghorne, who I mentioned earlier, he noted that it is a technique of proving fruitfulness in fundamental physics to seek those theories whose expression is in terms of beautiful equations. Mathematical beauty is valued by physicists not simply for the aesthetic pleasure it gives, but for its proven fruitfulness as a guide to successful theory choice. Continues. Dirac's discoveries in quantum theory and Einstein's discovery of general relativity both resulted from sustained and successful searches for beautiful equations. The world around us is ordered, not necessarily simply, but within its order is both complexity and elegance. And mathematics captures and reveals that beautiful order. Well, so what? Well, it just makes you think, or at least I think it ought to. Why is the world so open to mathematical investigation? Why is reality so ordered in such a complex yet elegant way? Is it just really coincidence? Is it really just chance? Paul Davies is a prominent physicist and not a Christian, but he thinks this is a question we all want to stop and think about. He says the fact that mathematics works when applied to the physical world and works so stunningly well demands explanation. For it is not clear we have any absolute right to expect that the world should be well described by mathematics. He then continues, major advances in mathematical physics really do represent discoveries of some genuine aspect of reality, and not just the reorganization of data in form more suitable for human intellectual digestion. According to Davies, the stunning power of mathematics demands explanation. But answering the why question is beyond the power of mathematics itself. As a mathematician, I can't logically step from this observation about the beautifully ordered nature of reality to some irrefutable conclusion about the existence of a God, let alone the existence of a personal God, or let alone the existence or the fact that Jesus may be Lord. I can't work up from mathematics to the truth that Jesus is Lord. But that doesn't mean answers aren't possible. And it certainly doesn't mean that the answers are unimportant. What I can say, though, as a Christian who believes what God has revealed in the Christian Bible, is that when the Bible tells me that God, the one true living God, is a God of order, who creates in an orderly fashion and whose creation is a reflection of his glory, then yes, I have a rational explanation for why reality has the ordered, beautiful nature that it so obviously has. Now, the Christian Vern Poitras puts it like this, in a somewhat confronting way. He says that profundity and mystery in mathematical discoveries can only produce awe, yes, worship, if we have not blunted our perception with hubris. Whilst I can't work up from mathematics to the existence of God, the one true living God has made his presence known through the beauty and power of mathematics, unless we've blinded ourselves to that reality by excluding him from the picture. As John Paul put it, if the world is the creation of the rational God, and we are creatures made in his divine image, then it is entirely understandable there is an order in the universe that is deeply accessible to our minds. Again, it doesn't prove that there is a God, let alone that Jesus is Lord. But if Jesus is Lord, the Christian Bible is right, then that explains why mathematics works in such an effective and elegant way. Now, we all know that there's more to life than mathematics. As a field of human inquiry in its own right, using its own standards and methods of proof in its own area, mathematics swims along quite happily. But the difficulty comes when someone tries to apply these standards and methods of proof to other non-mathematical areas. You may have seen this posted before. Prove to me that my wife loves me. Prove to me that your great-great-grandmother existed. Prove to me that God exists. That's just not how history or sociology or relationships or theology work. You can't take the methods and standards of mathematical proof and apply them outside of mathematics. The rest of reality doesn't work like that. As human beings, we need a broader range of approaches, not just to cope with the reality of relationships, but to deal with questions of history and theology and the person of Jesus in particular. And when it comes to grappling with the person of Jesus, it has to be the methods and standards of history that are our basic tools. So we've talked a lot about mathematics. What about Jesus? Well, the beating heart of Christianity is a claim about the historical person, Jesus of Nazareth. It was expressed like this by one of Jesus' first followers just 50 days after Jesus' execution. I'm quoting here from the account in Acts chapter 2 of the Christian New Testament. God has raised this Jesus to life, and we are all witnesses of it. Be assured of this, God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. Central to the Christian announcement about this man Jesus was his death, that he was crucified outside of Jerusalem around 30 AD, but also his resurrection, that he was alive again 40 hours later and seen by numerous eyewitnesses. But thirdly, crucial to the Christian announcement is what that means about Jesus, that the one true living God has made this Jesus Lord and Christ. Those two titles need explanation. Christ was a Jewish title, means anointed one or chosen one. Christianity affirms that Jesus is God's Christ, his chosen one, who stands at the centre of God's plans for the whole world. In particular, Jesus is at the centre of God's plans to save and restore us and the rest of creation from our present state, where we are subjected to decay, where we are victims of alienation, and where we are subject to death. But Christianity also affirms Jesus is the living Lord. That is, God raised Jesus back from the dead to eternal life on the third day after his execution. That was God's public announcement that Jesus is God's chosen ruler over all, and thereby also the judge of all, for whom the Bible said we will all have to give a personal account. Now, this conviction that Jesus is God's Christ and living Lord is not blind. It is not, and is not intended to be, a conviction that God expects us to hold irrationally on or blindly, as though faith, which just means trust, is inherently illogical or unfounded. That's not what the Bible teaches about faith or about Jesus. The Bible calls for people to acknowledge the truth about Jesus, that he is God, Christ, the living Lord, based on evidence. The particular items of evidence to which the Bible points are Jesus' death on the cross in fulfillment of earlier prophecy, and his resurrection to life, a real physical and immortal life 3 days later. The resurrection of Jesus is absolutely critical, according to the New Testament, to confirming his identity as Christ and Lord. So it's a fair question to ask, can we be sure that this resurrection of Jesus from the dead actually happened? Now again, we're outside the realm of mathematical proof here. We're asking a historical question. Did it happen? And so we have to use the standards of evidence accepted in history. Now, Dr. Tom Wright is a British historian and theologian who's written extensively on the historicity of Jesus' resurrection. He points to two key pieces of evidence: the reality of the empty tomb and the reported meetings with Jesus after he had died. And this is what he writes. He says the empty tomb and the meetings with Jesus, when combined, present us not with a sufficient condition for the rise of early Christian belief, but also, it seems, a necessary one. He continues, nothing else historians have been able to come up with has the power to explain the phenomena before us, by which he means the birth of the Christian church. Tom Wright goes on to recognise this is not a mathematical proof. He says this remains, of course, unprovable in logical or mathematical terms. The historian is never in a position to do what Pythagoras did. He constructed a theorem to prove that this must always be the case. With history, he says, it's not like that. History, after all, is mostly the study of the unusual and unrepeatable. What we are after is high probability, and this is to be attained by examining all the possibilities, all the suggestions, and asking how well they explain the phenomena. And then he concludes, in terms of the kind of proof which historians normally accept, The case presented that the tomb plus appearances combination is what generated early Christian belief is as watertight as one is likely to find. Now again, just as we saw when we reflected on mathematics, there's a so what question here. Big deal. So a bloke 2,000 years ago rose from the dead. What's that got to do with it? Well, my answer is the same as when we were reflecting on the mathematical nature of the world. This is reality. This is the world in which you and I live. It's a world in which mathematics reveals an amazingly ordered universe, and it reveals a world in which a dead man has risen from the grave 40 hours after being executed. That is the world in which you and I live. What do you make of that? Now, we can go and stick our head in the sand and say, well, it's got nothing to do with me, and refuse to answer any of the obvious questions that only a moment's reflection on these facts prompts. But then that places us out of touch with reality. The very reality and world in which you and I live, where this thing happened. See, I think everybody needs a toe. Not the appendage at the end of your foot, as usual as they are, those who have them. I mean, you need a theory of everything. For a long time, the physicists have sought a grand unified theory of physics. Really, the physicist's holy grail. But I want to suggest to you that the reality of the true theory of everything is present in Jesus. See, life is more than mathematics. There's relationships to negotiate, there's meaning to find, there's suffering that we have to face, there's ethical decisions to be made. Sadly, there's deaths to grieve, there's children to raise, there's plans to devise, there's complex real-life problems to solve. We can stick our head in the sand for as long as it's convenient to do so, but you have to operate with some sort of framework as you travel through life. In mathematics, you know the rules, you know the system. We just all follow the rules, submit to the standard, and hopefully nobody gets hurt in the process. The rest of life is not like that. How are you going to move forward in the complexity of life? My mathematical approach doesn't work here. In particular, there is the troublesome data point of Jesus' resurrection that has to fit into your system somewhere, somehow. If he really did rise from the dead, which is the conclusion to which the historical evidence points, then your personal worldview needs to explain it, needs to account for it. I want to suggest to you that Christianity provides the framework, the worldview, which gives an answer, which provides the theory of everything. The world is the ordered creation of an ordered creator God who's created us in his own image, including creating us with the capacity for ordered thought and the ability to discern the deep ordering of reality around us. Moreover, Christianity in the person of Jesus provides answers to real questions that are beyond the reach of mathematics, questions that really matter to us. It helps us make sense of the issues of life that maths is never going to solve. Relationships, ethics, suffering, morality, hope, even death. Furthermore, Christianity takes account of all the data, including the troublesome, but I would say glorious data point of Jesus' resurrection, for which other worldviews have nothing to explain. So, my conclusion. Who rules the universe? Pythagoras, writing in the 6th century BC, declared that numbers rule the universe. 500 years later, a dead man walked out of a tomb, having been dead for 40 hours, and having had his body transformed into a new immortal physicality. The eyewitnesses at the time who were there said, God has raised this Jesus to life, and we're all witnesses of it. Be assured of this, God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. Who rules? Mathematics? Or maybe this Jesus, risen from the grave? You haven't taken the opportunity to at least investigate the claims of Jesus. And I encourage you, please, read one of the source documents. Read one of the gospel biography accounts that we have in the Christian New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Or maybe you could indicate your interest in trying to find out some more or ask your questions via the QR code. And I'll be hanging around. I'd love to deal with your questions after.
Thank you very much, Rowan, for the wonderful talk. And as Rowan mentioned, if you want to learn more or know more, please feel free to connect through the QR code. There's a lot more going on in these next 2 weeks as well. As mentioned at the start, we're running 2 weeks of unexpected answers. And so many faculties are running many different events, many public meetings. If you're interested in any of those, please go online. The website is very easy to find. Go to any of these events with a bunch of different topics, where many of the questions you may be having right now may find your answers. And for the EPS in particular, next Thursday, we have a panel talking about power, justice, and forgiveness in the quad refectory room. And also next week, about Jesus specifically, there are a couple of Mark dramas being run on Wednesday and Thursday in the evening, which are a 90-minute drama that tells us the story of Jesus' life. This very man who we as Christians claim is Lord over all things. We'll now take a little bit of time for questions. So if anyone has any specific questions for Rowan, this is your chance. Ask them. Feel free to reflect and think of the talk that's gone by and ask any questions that are on your mind. Feel free to raise your hand.
Rowan, you made a point about the mathematical community is looking really awesome and it's sort of showing that it's particularly fruitful looking for new theories. There seems to be a movement among scientists and to step away from the beautiful mathematics and to sort of get right into the nitty-gritty of it. How it's, with sometimes occasions where mathematics isn't beautiful, isn't pretty, still able to explain the universe. How does that seem to fit together?
I put up a moment ago Dirac's equation. If you know physics, and I don't pretend to, but if you understand sort of quantum physics and special relativity, the equation that you might know, Dirac's equation, is much more beautiful now than it was when he first developed it. So that's why I deliberately put up the one that he first developed. It is more messy. And it's, over time, it has been produced with greater clarity. I know that even in my own limited experience of working as a mathematician, I came up with proofs that were messy. But then on reflection, sometimes was able to come up with proofs that were more beautiful to prove the same truth. And that sometimes those things normally reveal, they provided more insights, actually, into the deeper structure of reality that you're trying to understand. So I think you can still come up with messy proofs that demonstrate truths, but often the insights come from the more beautiful truths, which comes by more sustained reflection, usually. But you should ask some of the other practicing scientists in the room. They'll have their own opinions on that question.
Could you, I guess, explain a bit more about a lot of Jesus and mathematics relating to maybe how maths may have been used before Jesus came, like maybe like the ancient Egyptians and pyramids or other, I guess, monuments of civil engineering that occurred before Jesus?
Yes, I think when we, you don't need to be a Christian to be able to use the tools of mathematics to understand some of the deep structures of reality. What I was trying to say was, I think the question is, how do I explain the power of mathematics? Why is mathematics so beautifully adept at describing these realities? And as I tried to say by quoting from some of those other people, that's a question that many prominent scientists over the years have said, that's worth asking that question. Why is it so powerful? Not just going, oh, well, it just seems to work. Actually take a step back and think about the bigger question. And I'm suggesting to you, mathematics itself will not be able to provide you with the answer. But I think it does, Christianity provides an explanation for why mathematics works, because God is an ordered God who has created this world as a reflection of his own glory, therefore of his own order and his own sort of beauty and truth. And that's why mathematics works. That's an explanation, which I think makes sense. But you're going to have to come up with your own explanation. Why do you think mathematics really works? Or are you just going to stick your head in the sand and say, oh, I don't know, it just works? Well, then I think God is telling you something by the power that mathematics has to describe reality. So maybe we should pay attention to that.
If we have no further questions, we'll now ask Felicity to come up and just pray.
So I just want to pray now. As Christians, prayer is how we communicate with God, and it's an important part of our relationship with him. We believe that when we pray, God listens to us and we can approach him with the things on our hearts. So if you feel comfortable, please join me as I pray. Heavenly Father, thank you that you have woven profound, complex order and elegant rationality into this world you created. That mathematics is not an arbitrary pursuit, but helps us interpret and understand this world you have made so beautiful. And thank you that we do not have to abandon our logical standards when we come to the person of Jesus. We thank you that you are a God who encourages us on our quest to understand reality and discover truth, whether that be in our position as academics, postgraduates, or undergraduate students. I pray, Father, that you would help us to trust and be sure of the historical truth of Jesus' life, most especially his resurrection from the dead and what it means for who he is. And for those here who are not yet sure of what they think about Jesus, I pray that you will help give them courage to research these claims with the same fervor and scrutiny that they apply to all other research and study. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks everyone for coming along. If you have more questions or more thoughts or more things to discuss, we'll be heading over to the law lawns and maybe you can ask some of your questions there as well. But obviously there's a lot going on in the next 2 weeks. If you have questions, please talk to the people, the person who brought you here, or find out for yourself during this time, or these questions to these unexpected answers to many of the questions you may have. Or get found in these. Thank you everyone for coming. And maybe I'll see you soon as well. Feel free to come talk to me.